or see your screen shares, and hope everyone's doing well. How's your husband doing? How's Saul doing? You're muted. I can't hear you, but that's okay. I think you were nodding, so that's a good thing.
Thank you for asking. He's weak, but he's okay.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we're sending our prayers to him, and I hope and pray he gets better soon.
Thank you.
I know it's been a crazy week for all of us. We've been so absorbed with COVID the last 14, 15 months, we forget that there are wars too. And it's really sad what's happening in Israel. Let's hope things get better. I know our prayers are with them, and it's just our friends in Israel. I can't imagine what they've gone through. Much more severe lockdowns than we experienced. And they finally get vaccinated. Things are back to life. And then this. So it's a scary time.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I have a friend I started kindergarten with that lives in Israel. We've kept it up all these years. You do the math. And I sent her an email, and I have not heard from her. And she usually answers back immediately. We're very concerned.
Yeah. And part of it, where does she live in Israel?
Jerusalem, right near the big shul, because we walked from the hotel we were at when we were there with Rabbi Rosen. I'm on the treadmill, if you're wondering why I'm breathless. Never let a good opportunity go by, Rabbi.
Yeah, I'm impressed. You can study and work out at the same time. I love it.
So, and we walked to their condo.
Sure.
So
I'm optimistic they're okay, because Jerusalem, that initial barrage of rockets, hasn't experienced any other rockets since.
Right.
But I hope she'll be okay, Joan. Keep us posted.
I shall. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope everything's okay. Well, I wanted to share first kind of a summary of what I spoke about a few weeks ago, and then answer a question I think has been on a lot of people's minds is, how could people be against the vaccine, especially religious people? Where does this idea come from? And I'll give it from a Jewish perspective. But let me just kind of summarize what I spoke about a few weeks ago. So a few weeks ago, I talked about how things are looking good. And look, they're even better now. Speaking of Israel, I think we're going to discover soon what Israel experienced. Once Israel got 50% of its adult population vaccinated, the COVID rates plummeted. And that's what we're starting to find now. Thank God, finally. They are really decreasing, not just here in Houston, but across the country. Even some of the previous hotspots over the last several months, like Michigan, the rates are really decreasing. I think we all sense it when we go out. You don't have to wear your mask outside anymore. Certainly have to wear it inside, like places like Beth Yeshurun and in restaurants and so forth, before you sit down. But I think we're all getting a sense that we're feeling safer. I see it here. More and more people are coming. Whether it's 100 Jewish men, we had our first 100 Jewish men in-person event last night, which was wonderful, and services, and we had Kehillah High graduation last night, and people are starting to come back. In fact, we met with Jennifer and I and a few other people, met with some doctors last week, and we're going to be open for the high holidays. We don't know what that means in terms of limits and what the rules will be, but we will be open, and people will be here for the high holidays. So we are, it's all good. Now, what can make it even better is that more people get vaccinated. And you've seen some of the surveys I've seen where I think over a third of U.S. adults have said they're not going to get vaccinated. So if you add in children under the age of 11, we're not going to get to herd immunity. If 30% of American adults don't get vaccinated, and you add in the millions of children who won't get vaccinated until probably late this year, we won't get to the 70% that's needed in the population to give us herd immunity. In fact, I was speaking with a doctor last night at 100 Jewish men. And he said it's really a shame that we're not going to get there, because while things are good and things will get better, we're going to see a reemergence of COVID in the winter. And if we had herd immunity, that reemergence would be decreased significantly. But it sounds like this is going to become a seasonal disease like the flu, but of course more dangerous. And who knows what the winter will bring. Hopefully it won't be terrible. I don't think it'll be anything like last winter. But if we got herd immunity, not only would it be safer now, it could be safer for years to come. And it's a shame. And I hear two arguments from people that say, you know what? I don't need to do it. The first one is, I haven't gotten COVID. And the people I know who've gotten COVID haven't really been so bad. Yeah, a lot of people have died, but I don't know anyone who's died. Or I got COVID, or my friend got COVID. And you know what? They were out for a few days. It wasn't that big of a deal. So why do I need to get the vaccine? And it reminds me of an old argument in the Talmud. And the rabbis of the Talmud didn't know of COVID, but they knew of plagues and they knew of dangers. And they had found a very interesting story that if there's a barrel of water and it's suspect whether or not how safe that water is, and 9 people drink from it and they're fine, you may think, well, I'm the 10th one. 9 other people drank from it. They were fine. I can go have some of that water. The rabbis of Talmud say, no, you're actually not allowed to have some of that water. In fact, that water could be dangerous. And even though 9 people have survived, doesn't mean there's no danger to that water. And I find it interesting that the rabbis were dealing with, 90%, if you will. And you were the 10th one. Well, COVID rates are somewhat similar, right? They say, 95% of people are, don't die from COVID, or 99%, if you will. But there's still that 1% chance. And so even though you may have gotten COVID, or people have got COVID, and you don't feel like you really need a vaccine because it maybe isn't so bad, it is potentially life-threatening. And the rabbis of the Talmud would tell us, you still need to get vaccinated. Now, a second argument I hear from people, and I mentioned this in my sermon, is don't worry about me. You can get your vaccine. I'm not stopping you, but I'm just worried about myself, my family. You do what you want. Why should you care if I get the vaccine or not? And that goes to a personal, yes, we have, as Americans, we treasure our individual rights, our individual freedoms. That's one of the things that makes America so great. But it's not a very Jewish idea. And it's not a really American idea either, because we forget what America, the bedrock of America, is not just individual rights, but it's also communal responsibility. And all of us as individuals can't enjoy those freedoms unless we have some responsibility towards our neighbors. And, this frightening thing about this is, think about previous generations and what they had to sacrifice in order for the greater good. It's not like the government's asking us to storm the beaches of Normandy. They're asking us to get a vaccine that's been proven safe, and a vaccine that can not only save our lives, but the lives of many others. And so when we lose that sense of communal responsibility, we end up damaging not only others, but eventually we end up damaging ourselves. And so the tradition would be the same way. It says all the way in the Torah, don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. It says in the Talmud that if you have a rooftop, you're obligated on that roof to build a fence around the roof so you don't fall off and land on someone. You always have to think about others. And for the example I gave in my sermon, I have a lunch in a little bit to go meet someone. I can't get on 610 loop and drive 100 miles per hour saying, well, why should you, I can do what I want. No, I'm causing dangers to other people. And when certain people don't get vaccinated, they not only keep us from reaching herd immunity, they also allow a place for the vaccine, God forbid, to create variants that the vaccines can't cure. The vaccines can't stop. And so the greater amount of people that are vaccinated, the greater opportunity there is for the virus to mutate in a way that could cause more damage to us. And so it's not okay when people say, I'm not interested, I don't care, I don't need to, I don't have the time, I'm nervous. Those are not good reasons to not get the vaccine. Now, of course, if someone has a medical condition, their doctors have explicitly told them, don't get the vaccine. I'm not talking about those people. By the way, that's a very small percentage. I'm talking about the people out there that have no interest in doing it, who are anti-vaxxers, who are scared, don't want to be sick for a few hours or a day. Those are not good reasons. No one wants to be sick, and I know a lot of people have not felt great after this first or second dose. I was fortunate. I felt fine, but my wife and one of my kids didn't feel so great for a day either. But that's not a reason to not do it. You're not only endangering yourself, but you're also endangering the community. So that's kind of what I spoke about a few weeks ago. But a lot of people ask me, say, Rabbi, that all makes sense. I understand it. I've gotten the vaccine, but I don't understand, how are there people out there, especially in the religious world, in the Jewish religious world, whether they're Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, who say they believe in the tradition, who go to synagogue, who keep mitzvot, especially in our Orthodox communities, who are refusing to get the vaccine. How could they stand on principle? What Jewish values are they standing by? And so I want to share with you a few things that may answer that question. So let me first give you a little reason why this hesitancy may be out there. So this was written by a colleague, Chaim Steinmetz, who's an Orthodox rabbi who is very pro-vaccine. But he speaks about that the hesitancy has surfaced in the Orthodox world over the last decade or so. And unfortunately, these anti-vaccination views persist in parts of the Orthodox community. I'm not talking about in Israel, I'm talking about here in the United States, in New Jersey and New York especially. In fact, in May 2019, there was actually an anti-vaccination rally in Muncie, New York, a very ultra-Orthodox area of New York. And it was attended by hundreds, if not thousands of people. And these opponents, they even opposed childhood vaccinations, not talking just COVID, but basic vaccinations against smallpox and other vaccinations that we receive as children that, thank God, are available today. These people are even against that, undermining confidence in vaccines. Now, where the roots of vaccination hesitancy in the ultra-Orthodox community come from skepticism of science and medicine. As we all know, there's a long-standing opposition to all secular studies, including science, because unfamiliarity with science ultimately leads to contempt and suspicion. And so when you're dealing with communities that really don't study science, that don't appreciate science, that don't do what we do when it comes to appreciating secular studies, it's not surprising that you would find certain people hesitant to believe science. So let me share something with you, the first text of where does this hesitancy come from in the tradition. Let me open this up. Hold on a second, that's not the right one. Okay. Okay, does everyone see that? Text number 1, rooted in a comment. So rooted in a comment, this week's Torah reading by Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, which is the Ramban, the great 13th century Spanish rabbi and commentator. The Ramban wrote, when the Jewish people are in a state of spiritual perfection, they will have no need of doctors, nor will they have to follow medical procedures, even as precautionary measures. For I, God, am your healer. The Ramban actually argued that hidden miracles are constantly possible, and if a person truly perfects themselves, they can live in a world of divine healing without doctors, medications, and health insurance. The Ramban's misgivings about medicine are misgivings about a natural world, which is imperfect, accident-prone, and random. In his view, these flaws are due to our disconnection from God. Even so, the Ramban recognized that to rely on prayer is impractical, and at the end of his remarks, he counseled that one should not rely on miracles and see a doctor when needed. The Ramban was actually a doctor himself. However, other rabbis took the Ramban's view a step further and said that one can refuse medical interventions and pray instead. Rav Nachman of Breslov, a 19th century Hasidic master, wrote that the only reason why a person would need to chase after medical therapies is because they lack faith. And God forbid they should search for therapies, but rather they should place their full trust in prayer and supplications. And the Avnei Nezer, who passed away in 1910, argued that one can refuse to consult doctors or accept their advice because the opinions of doctors are unreliable, and one would be better off with prayer. So before we go to my second and last text, what are your initial thoughts about what I just read? Surprise, disgust.
That is amazing. I'm just amazed that in this day and age we have people, not only Jewish people, but Christian people who feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And what's interesting also is that, remember Christian Scientists in 2010, they actually went back against what they used to say, that you didn't need doctors or medicine. They used to be very proponents of that. They've actually gone back on that because they were losing so many believers. So many people were leaving their church that they actually took a step back and said, actually doctors are okay. Because I think, on a side note, speaking of Israel earlier, we forget 2 weeks ago, Israel experienced another tragedy, what happened in Meron, on Mount Meron. And where 45 ultra-Orthodox Jews were killed. They were trampled to death in a horrible Lag BaOmer accident. And what Israel found until this week, but a lot of ultra-Orthodox people were coming out and saying, you know what? We realize we've gone too far, that we've tried to create our own autonomy. We haven't listened to the secular authorities. We haven't taken safety into account. We've relied too much on God. And it's a reminder to us that God never tells us that we can just rely on him. In other words, I always remind people, you have to meet God halfway. The rabbis say something really amazing in the Talmud. It's one of my favorite teachings. They say, even the most righteous person in the world, don't walk by palm trees on a windy day. Right? You may go to synagogue every week. You may give 50% of your income to tzedakah. You may be the kindest, nicest person in the world, but you can't rely on miracles, right? You have to meet God halfway. You can't just say, you know what? I don't have to worry about going to the doctor or eating well or exercising, or if I'm sick, no, I don't know. God will heal me. That's not the way God operates. That's not the way our world operates. Now, I do believe God performs miracles. I think there's certain things that I can't explain. I can't fully explain how God works in this world. It's something I study all the time, and we're all trying to figure out. And Jewish tradition isn't clear on that either. But what the tradition usually is pretty clear on is you can't rely on miracles.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
what about the teaching that I had? It's hard for me to remember exactly where now, but God gave us choices. And the choice was to choose life. So if you stretch that out by having, whether it's the measles shot or the MRI, whatever, are we not choosing life by choosing to be vaccinated? I mean, aren't we following the Bible
Right.
exactly in that way?
You're exactly right. We read just a few weeks ago, B'chai Bechem, you shall live by them. And that's why an Orthodox Jew who doesn't drive on Shabbat can still drive to the hospital on Shabbat, because saving life even overrides Shabbat. I have a friend of mine here in Houston who's an Orthodox rabbi, and his wife started going into, I don't know why I'm forgetting a lot of words today, but she was going into labor. Sorry about that. She was going into labor on Yom Kippur. And they live over in the Fondren Southwest area. Too far to walk to a hospital, obviously, even if they lived a few blocks away. You can't walk when you're going into labor. So my wife tells me, and I'm sure some of the women on here could tell me as well. They got right into the hospital. There was no question, even on Yom Kippur, because you're exactly right, Joan. Jewish law is not, there's only 3 instances, by the way, in which law oversees life. Only 3 things, like the rabbis give an example in the Talmud. If your life is threatened and someone says, eat this pork or I'm going to kill you, you eat the pork. If someone says, break Shabbat or I'm going to kill you, you break Shabbat. There's only 3 instances, by the way, in which you actually are supposed to give up your life and hopefully none of us will ever find ourselves in this position, but one of them is worshiping an idol. One of them is doing something very sexually inappropriate. And the third one is taking someone else's life. And so those are the only three instances where you should give up your life. Otherwise, you're exactly right. The law shouldn't cause your death, and whatever it means you need to do. So I often find, I think in the ultra-Orthodox world where people are looking for excuses not to get vaccinated, you can pick and choose very carefully what you use to justify your actions. That's one of the great challenges of the Jewish tradition, right? We have such a vast tradition of wisdom, and we have such a vast tradition of text that go back thousands of years. Some of it is often contradictory. And here you find, even Nachmanides, who was a doctor himself, at the beginning of those writings that I just shared with you, is saying, well, maybe you don't really need a doctor. And then eventually he gets around to it and says, yeah, actually you do. And that was in the 13th century. Imagine how primitive medicine was back then. Well, all the more so today when medicine, thank God, is so advanced and it really can save your life. And so all the more so, this miracle vaccine that we've all made available to us is God working in this world. But unfortunately, some of even our Jewish brothers and sisters don't see it that way. Del?
I refuse to take the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccines because I was very unsure of the science behind the making of those vaccines. We come back to the Talmud and you're unsure of the barrel of water, and 9 people drink out of it. You don't be the 10th.
Did you take the Johnson & Johnson?
I took the Johnson & Johnson.
Okay, good. Well, good, because I like seeing you at Shul. I want to see you as often as possible, and I want you to live. And I don't want, God forbid, something to happen to you. So that makes me feel good. And I respect that. There was a tshuva written by Rabbi David Galinkin. He's a leading voice of conservative Judaism in Israel, called the Masorti movement. And he talked exactly what you talked about, Del. And I understand that. And I respect that. It is a new science. The mRNA technology is new. Johnson & Johnson and other vaccines are based on more older technology, if you will. It's been around for centuries, using some of the actual virus itself in the vaccine, as opposed to the mRNA new groundbreaking technology that was found in the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. The rabbi says basically, and it's pages and pages, but in a nutshell, he says that it has been proven safe, not just from the science, but from many, many doctors and professionals. And we have to trust those who are experts in the field, that they have our better judgment than we do. He uses the example that if you need heart surgery, you're not going to look up, and I don't mean this any disrespect to you, but you're not going to look up on the internet and see how to do heart surgery on yourself. You're going to go to the experts, and you have to trust them. Well, he used the same example here, that we have to trust the doctors. And there are some doctors, you're right, there are some doctors who actually are refusing themselves to get the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, but an overwhelming majority are getting them. And so there are certain things we just have to put our faith in, that these things are safe. But again, that's what he wrote, and I agree with that. But I also respect your decision. I'm glad there's another vaccine available. I guess my question for you, Del, is if the Johnson & Johnson wasn't available, let's say, I know parts of Europe still only have the AstraZeneca, but Zeneca. I don't know, is that the new technology or the old technology?
That's the new stuff, I believe.
Yeah, there are parts of Europe that's the only choice they have. If that was the case here in America, what would you have done?
Well, my attitude was I figured I was in a very low risk category. And so my chances of getting it were slim to none. And I was going to wait out the first year and let a few billion people take this vaccine.
Yeah.
And, by then I could say, well, if we haven't had any real bad side effects, it's probably safe.
And look, I get that. I think that's probably where a lot of people, you have your anti-vaxxers that are just against any vaccine, and I kind of put them in one category. And I think you have people like yourself and who are saying, this is new. Granted, the studies were pretty well done and there are doctors telling me, but there's something about it that just makes me uncomfortable. And I get that. I respect that. I'll share with you Lincoln's tshuva about the new technologies. I'm trying to think if I have it. I'll send it to Jennifer. Jennifer, maybe you could send it out to everyone when we're done. I think I can get a copy of it that she can send to everyone. Take a look at it and let me know what you think. I'm not doing it justice, but after reading his tshuva, it was pretty compelling to still take even these new technologies, even these new vaccines, these new type of vaccines. But I understand. Now look, God forbid a year from now we all wake up and everyone who took it has a fourth nose or something. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. I'm 99.9% confident. And I'd rather take the chance with that than, God forbid, take the chance of getting the coronavirus. But I understand where you're coming from. So yours is less of a vaccine hesitation. It's more the new technology. But thank God that J&J was available.
Rabbi, I was going to say that from what I've read, the mRNA technology has been worked on at least since 2012. So it's
That's
not
right.
like they just came up with it in 2020 to make the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines.
It's been used for other. I
Yes.
didn't realize that. I appreciate you
Yes.
letting me know that. I should have known that. That's good to know. And look, and from what I have read, God forbid when there's other outbreaks, and I hope no time soon or ever, but if there's another pandemic, that technology will be available and we can get vaccines just as soon, even sooner. I mean, if I would have told you, I think I said this in the sermon 2 weeks ago, a year ago right now, we were in lockdown. It was an awful time. In April, May of 2020, I think it was some of the most difficult times in all our lives. If I would have told you then that it just 8 months from now, because, a lot of us got it in January, February, March, that, and they were remember the news was telling us it could be 5 years. I mean, can you imagine if we would have still been waiting for a vaccine? How economically and mentally and we are very far. Look what India is going through right now. Canada, the vaccines aren't available. I don't know if Toronto's still in lockdown, but as of last week, they were. I mean, this is Toronto, a major modern city. It's very similar to America, but unlike America, they can't get the vaccines. There's no vaccines being produced in Canada. They're actually getting their vaccines from Belgium. They're being shipped in. They're not getting their vaccines from Michigan. And as of last week, and that may be changing now because we have so many vaccines. So, I mean, we are so blessed. And here in Texas, especially, they can't give it away. I mean, literally, there are states turning it away. So we are very blessed. We really are. Lily?
Rabbi, is there any way that you and your fellow clergy can, well, I mean, I know you're doing your part with encouraging people, but what about other religious leaders speaking to their congregations?
It's happening. It's funny. I was flattered, and I ended up not hearing from him, but there was a member of our community who does some work with the mayor. And after he heard my sermon, he said, I'm going to call you next week. And the mayor's putting together a team of clergy. I want you to be part of it to get this message out. I didn't hear from him. Hopefully I will, but I know that I've heard that the mayor is trying to do things like that. And I think the city is trying to do. I know I've heard Dr. Fauci talk about that they need to get mentioned athletic personalities, stars, movie stars, and clergy out there trying to encourage people to get it. And that's why I gave that sermon 2 weeks ago. And I thought I would get some blowback. I didn't get any. It was all positive. I was pleasantly surprised. I think there are some people in our shul that aren't getting it. I know nothing's 100%, but my unscientific study, I think most people in our Jewish community have gotten it. I mean, I'm going to guess 80%. I could be off, but just from talking to people, and now that our middle school kids can get it, I knowing Jewish moms, knowing, Jewish parents, I should say, not Jewish moms, the Jewish kids are going to be the first in line. I mean, when I think it opens today, maybe.
Yeah.
Is it today? Yeah. So I know especially moms that have been a mitzvah coming up. I know, Jennifer, you got a bar mitzvah coming up. I'm
My
sure
kids are
your
scheduled
boys-
for next Wednesday.
Yeah, I figured they would be. In fact,
Mhm.
I'm kind of disappointed it's not until Wednesday. But I'm just
They have finals next week, so I'm going to wait till their finals are done. I don't need
I'm just-
any excuses for why you didn't study for your final.
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding.
No.
Yeah, and I think by the end of this month, most Jewish kids in Houston will be vaccinated. Now, with that said, look, we are very blessed in the Jewish community. You know, many of us have jobs that we can take time off to go do this. Let's not forget about our friends in the greater community who work endless hours for not enough pay, who can't get their kids to these clinics, who aren't getting the positive messages we're getting. I was very proud of our synagogue. A month ago, we hosted a clinic with one of the churches over in the Westbury area. It was a Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We did it with Jewish Family Service. And I got to volunteer there for just a little bit that afternoon. And I couldn't find anyone in the Jewish community to come get it. Everyone had already been vaccinated. But we brought in over 1,000 people in the greater community. Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, people off the street who could just walk in and get the vaccine. So we've got to do that. We've got to promote this to make sure that everyone has access to these vaccines.
Rabbi, regarding
all in the same.
Canada, I read yesterday that 2,000 vaccines have been sent to the border between the United States and Canada to allow the truckers who legally go back and forth with goods. I think it's either Idaho and Montana that are doing it, so that the 2,000 truckers that go back and forth can receive the vaccine, whether they're Canadian or American, doesn't matter. You're a trucker, you come back and forth, you get the vaccine.
And I suspect once more and more Americans are vaccinated, I'm sure we'll start shipping vaccines. I think they probably have shipped to others too. You mentioned the truckers, Joan. That's good to hear because look, we all know, our first priority has to be to get Americans vaccinated, but then we got to help our neighbors in other countries, because not only is it the humanitarian thing to do, but God forbid, there, like I mentioned earlier, in India, for example, there's some variant that develops, and we have, God forbid, a million times we have to start from square one. And that's the last thing any of us want to see happen. So let me share one more text with you. And let me try to make it a little bit bigger this time. Okay, Jennifer, is that better? Give me the thumbs up. Can you read that a little better?
It's
Still
really small on my screen.
That's so weird. Is it small on everyone else's screen?
No, it's wonderful. I can see it on the bike. I'm on the
I
bike.
put my reading glasses on. I can see it.
I can see it.
Yeah, it's clear now. It's small, but
Clear.
it's clear.
Okay. Well, let me share this with you what this rabbi wrote, which I thought was great. Rav Soloveitchik wrote that God left creation incomplete so that humanity can fix the world and thereby become God's partner in creation. An incomplete world will have disease. It is our God-given responsibility to cure those diseases. Medicine is holy work, an act that completes God's creation. For this reason, Jews have always had a passion for medicine. Many medieval rabbis were also medical professionals, and they saw this as part of their religious calling. In Jews' medicine in medieval society, Joseph Schlotzmiller reveals that there were regions in medieval Europe where less than 1% of the population was Jewish, yet Jews were over 50% of the doctors. There's a long Jewish history to the proud phrase, my son, the doctor, and I should say now, my daughter, the doctor. It's someone who has a daughter who wants to be a doctor. And this is partly because of the Jewish yearning to make the world a better place. We don't only connect to God through prayer, we can also connect to God through healing and compassion. The scientists, doctors, and nurses that cure disease are making the world a better place and doing God's work. And going back to what we were saying before about meeting God halfway, you've heard this joke before, but it's one of my favorites. There's an old joke about a man who prays to God to save him from an incoming flood. Because of his deep faith that God alone will save him, he first ignores a canoe, then a motorboat, then finally a helicopter that offered to save him. After he drowns, the man goes to heaven. He confronts God and asks God, why didn't you come to rescue me? God responds, of course I tried to save you. I sent you a canoe, a motorboat, and a helicopter. You just didn't take them. And so what an important reminder it is for us. God sent us this vaccine, and can we see them as miracles? Can we encourage our friends and family to get them, not only for themselves, but for all of us? It's a great problem to have. Again, if I would have told you a year ago that our biggest challenge would be to get the vaccines out there, you would have thought I was crazy. 6 months ago, our greatest problem was to avoid COVID. Still have to be careful, but I think our greatest challenge now is to get more people vaccinated. So God willing, the blessings continue for us and for people everywhere, and of course, our friends in Israel. Thank you guys for joining me for a few minutes. I'm going to find that tshuva from Rabbi Galinkin, and if I can, I'll have Jennifer send it out to everyone. And I hope to see everyone in shul. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.